Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be going over the top 5 fishing lures for winter fishing, particularly bass fishing. To start it off, I have this Bass Pro Shaky-Head, and I'll unbox it for you for my first lure, which is the Shaky-Head. So to pop one of these out, it looks just like a regular worm-style jig head, but it has this screw on the end of it. And so the way that this works is usually you pair it with some sort of straight tail worm. There's many different ones you can choose from. My personal favorite is the Zoom trick worm. This is watermelon red flake. One of my all-time personal favorites. Looks just like this. And basically what I like to do, I take the thicker of the two ends, and so what I'll do with it is I will screw it into the top. And once you get it screwed on tight, what I like to do, I like to line it up. See exactly where the hook's going to go through, like so. And then I'm going to just poke it right through like that, so it falls straight. And if you want to make it a little more weedless, then I'll just poke it back in the worm. Just a little bit like that. And so what this is going to do when you cast it out, this is going to hit the bottom, and this tail is going to stand straight up like this. And so what that tail is going to do in the water is it's just going to dangle like this. I personally don't like to hop this up and down in the winter because I don't like all that action. But if you just kind of sit it there, maybe move it a little bit, this will just dangle on its own, making it a perfect enticing bite for a winter bass, especially because they're looking for an easy meal, something that they can attack easy, that doesn't take a lot of effort. And unlike in the summertime, when you might be going after more aggressive fish and hopping this big over rocks and stuff, that's not what you want to do in the winter. In the winter, I just want to let it sit there a little bit and let this dangle just like so. I mean, even if I just hold it here steady, you can just see the action on the tail of that. That is the first of the 5 lures I'm going to talk about today. It is the Shaky-Head. This, I believe, is the 1/8 ounce. You can go heavier if you want to. I throw this on a spinning rod. This was the Zoom trick worm, watermelon red color. I'll show you some other of my favorite straight tail worms. This is the Cabin Creek Bait Company. Very similar, kind of a green pumpkin color. And lastly, a Biospawn Plasma Tail. Now, I really like this because it has a little chartreuse end like so, and it's primarily green pumpkin, but with a chartreuse end. Soft plastics have a special place in my heart, and the trick worm is my go-to whenever I want to throw the Shaky-Head, which is probably one of my most favorite lures to throw in the winter. Definitely a top 5. For my next lure, I have crankbaits. Now, not super specific, but what I do like, I need certain characteristics. This is a square bill crankbait, but it's not your typical square bill. It's not super fat because in the wintertime, I don't want a real big wobble or a very big shimmy. That's not what I want. I want a very skinny, preferably flat if you can get it, so that it has a real tight wobble like that in the water. And this is going to be for your smaller bodies of water where maybe the bass aren't super deep. And so multiple different styles of crankbait you can use. There's one, the square bill, which is my personal favorite kind for any time of year, but particularly the warm months, but I have noticed it catches me fish even in the wintertime. Next up is kind of a medium diving crankbait, which is, this is 7 foot. Now this is a little bit fatter than I would like. If I got to choose, then I would make this a little bit less fat. I would make this a little skinnier, make it a little bit more flat so it didn't have as wide of a wobble. But this is just an example of a color I would use, a crawdad color, brown on top, orange on bottom. Very good, very nice rattle in it. So definitely a favorite, and I have caught fish on it, especially in the winter months, so I will put it in here. But if I got to design it, I would make it a little bit more flat so it didn't have quite as big of a wobble. Next up, I have a similar style bait as the kind of an in-between between the last two. This dives similar length, but it's a little bit too fat again for me because it's going to have a fairly wide wobble. So if you can get a skinny or flat-sided crankbait, then that would work perfect. But I really like this color because in the winter, a lot of shad and small bodies of water die off because they can't survive the winter months. So this, if you can go this as slow as you possibly can, so it's seriously just moving like that much on the bottom of the water column, I think it'll be deadly. It looks like a dying shad because a lot of shad do die in the winter, especially whenever it freezes over, or if half of the lake or the pond is frozen and the other half isn't. The shad don't have anywhere to go and they end up dying off, makes it an easy meal for a bass. But my second lure on this list is the crankbait, one of many different kinds. My next lure is also a hard bait, this being a jerkbait. In the wintertime, something that I like to keep consistent through everything is downsizing. So this I believe is a Lucky Craft jerkbait, and it's probably on the bigger end of something I would throw. I have some 7-inch jerkbaits. I believe this is a 6, and I like downsizing to something like this, which is a 4.5, because in the wintertime, bass are just not as aggressive. They're on the bottom. Sometimes they're laying down on the rocks or in the mud, and something that I need my jerkbaits to do in the winter is to suspend in the water column so that you can jerk it, make it go however low that you want it to, and then it'll just sit there. And I've noticed a lot of the times I'll get most of my hits where I'll twitch it, and then I'll just let it sit there, and then a bass will come get it. Because what this is imitating is some sort of bait fish, a minnow, a shad, any kind of color you want. It imitates a bait fish that's actually dying in the water and struggling to swim. So you can see it'll be trying to swim, and then it just stops. And that is a perfect time for a bass to come up and engulf it. Now, several different colors I like to go with. This is kind of more like a sunfish color. It's got some purple in it, maybe like a bluegill. That's a great option. This is a typical Rapala jerkbait, kind of your normal minnow or shad color, dark on top, light on the bottom. This is a bone color, another kind of shad replica. Another kind of shad replica style bait. This, I like my jerkbaits to have a little bit of noise because I think genuinely it attracts a little bit more fish. This would be better for clear water. And this is a little bit bigger, has a little bit more of a rattle. And this is something, it's not that I wouldn't throw it in the winter, it's just if I wasn't getting bites on this, then pretty quickly I would downsize to something like this. Because I've noticed that the bass, they prefer just smaller baits, less action, just downsize in the winter. That's what I've noticed. And so for my third bait on this list is the jerkbait. My next lure on this list is a finesse jig. Now, the reason I like finesse jigs, particularly over big football style jigs, definitely not a swim jig in the wintertime just because I don't like all that action. But I like getting a small skirt, and so that when you go down, you can just barely crawl it along the rocks. I'm talking this fast. Because if you can't get a bite on absolutely anything, if the Shaky-Head didn't work, if the crankbait didn't work, if the jerkbait didn't work, and you just need to get a bite, the finesse jig I've noticed has been amazing for me in the wintertime. I've probably caught most of my fish in the winter on this exact lure right here. I like natural color, so this is kind of almost a bluegilly, but it's more of a green pumpkin style, but you can see it's got a little bit of that blue flash in it. I like a craw trailer or a chunk trailer, and I like it to be very small. This may even be a little too big for the wintertime. I was throwing this a lot in the fall, so this may actually be too big for the wintertime. I mean, I want a small trailer. I do not want a ton of action. I don't want a bunch of appendages flopping all over the place. You know, I don't want to burn this through the water so it's swimming like that. No, I want to just barely drag it over the rocks like so that it has the least amount of action possible, which I personally think is going to be great for catching winter bass, and that is why it is number 4 out of my 5 best lures for wintertime fishing, especially bass fishing. And that's not to say that any of these lures wouldn't catch other species, it's just I'm primarily a bass fisherman, and so this is what I know about. For my last, but certainly not least lure on this list, I have the jerk minnow, or the fluke, or kind of whatever style you want to call this. This specific one is from Kalen's. I really like the 4-inch version. This is probably my favorite fluke style, soft jerkbait that I want to use. You know, we talked about the hard jerkbait earlier, now we're talking about more of the soft jerkbait. And this specific one has lots of things that I like. It has the flared tail. Now this one has some cosmetic problems that are going on with it, but to get a better one here for you, I like one that has 2 flared ends so that it just has a little bit extra movement. I mean, you can just see by me barely wiggling it. It has lots of movement on the end. And the thing that I like most about this is that, like I was talking about, bait fish die in the winter, especially, this is more of a video geared towards your pond fishermen, your small lake fishermen, maybe not your giant bodies of water, but I specifically like this color because, again, dark on top, but it has just enough color to entice something. So, you know, if you have more sunfish, green sunfish or bluegill or whatever your bait fish is, or shad, it can pretty much look like any fish. Light on bottom, dark on top, which is perfect. And you can do you can rig this multiple ways. You can drop shot it, and so that it'll kind of be like this, dying towards the bottom. You can just put it on a standard kind of swim bait hook and just swim through the water like this, and then kind of make it die, and then make it swim up a little bit, and then make it die. The key is fishing it slow. You don't want it to be extremely fast. You do not want it to be a lure. You do not want to be targeting extremely aggressive fish because they're just simply not out there in the wintertime. I have personally never caught a fish by, speed swimming this through the water in the winter. The way I have caught it, though, is by just barely twitching it and then letting that tail do the action, or letting it hit all the way down to the bottom and then swimming up a little bit, looking like a dying bait fish. That is exactly what you're going for. And if you can do that with the Fluke or the soft jerkbait, then I think that you'll have lots of luck. One of my favorite, and that's why it is my 5th out of the top 5 best lures for winter bass fishing. Thanks for watching again. If you enjoyed this video, then please like it, comment what your favorite bass fishing lure in the winter is, and please subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.